In this era of emerging AI, are you wondering how to thrive as a coach and be well-versed in evolving technology? Welcome to Coaching Revealed. I'm one of your podcast hosts, Emily Tarani. In this podcast episode, host Jeffrey Hull, Executive Director of the Institute of Coaching, interviews Dr. Woodward, who's the Director of the Coaching Innovation Lab at NYU, who focuses on coaching, technology, and artificial intelligence. As a coach and psychologist, Dr. Woody has merged practice and science together in his roles to explore, utilize, and maximize technological advances and innovations. Woody and Jeff also discuss the impact relationships have had on their individual careers and how it's led them to where they are today. Along with tracking Woody's journey in his career, he deep dives into the latest advances in technology, particularly artificial intelligence, and how artificial intelligence and other technologies functionally work and apply to coaching. He reveals how COVID-19 served as a catalyst for the digitization of coaching, and Woody and Jeff explore the state of AI in coaching today, with AI bots, assistants, and other emerging technologies. Jeff and Woody discuss how coaches can utilize technology to their advantage and in support of their client work. The balancing act between optimization and scaling coaching to serve more people while maintaining the quality of personal relationships is a cornerstone for today's discussion. For coaches in today's modern world, Woody discusses how coaches can utilize emerging modern technology while still upholding the core values of the coaching profession. Thank you for tuning into Coaching Revealed. Let's get started.
Well, hello, everyone. And welcome to the Institute of Coaching podcast, Coaching Revealed. We are now in our third series, and we are super excited to be in the series of podcasts called Journey to Your Success. How can you navigate, build, and succeed in the coaching space in today's rather challenging but growing world of coaching? And today, I am honored to have with me in the studio Woodward, Dr. Woody Woodward, who is the Director of Coaching Innovation Lab at NYU and the leader of the Master of Science degree program in Executive Coaching and Organizational Consulting at the NYU School of Professional Studies. He sits on the board of directors of the International Coaching Federation and the Thought Leadership Institute at ICF. So we have, needless to say, an expert in the house. He's a friend of mine and of the Institute of Coaching. We're really excited to have you here today, Woody. And the theme for today's podcast is how to survive and thrive of the world of technology. You are someone who has jumped wholeheartedly into this space with a new book called The Digital Coaching Revolution: How to Support Employee Development with Coaching Tech, with Anna Tavis and yourself. And you've also run really successful symposiums on technology at NYU, the use of technology in coaching. So we thought you would be the ideal person to help our listeners see if they can effectively navigate the world of artificial intelligence and kind of the tsunami of change that we're all grappling with. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this podcast is sponsored by the Institute of Coaching, affiliate of Mass General Hospital, Mass General Brigham, and Harvard Medical School. Let me jump into welcoming Woody Woodward. We're so happy to have you here. I'm happy to have you here. And given the name of our podcast, which is Coaching Revealed, I always like to start by asking my guests to talk a little bit about their personal journey. You know, you didn't just wake up one day and lead the master's degree program in coaching and in organizational consulting at NYU. So tell us a little about your own personal journey. How did this ultimately lead you into, how did your background and everything ultimately lead you into this crazy world of coaching?
Well, yeah, Jeff, lightning just didn't strike and make me a coach, that's for sure. It was a longer process than that. But first of all, it's always great to see you. And it really is an honor to be on the podcast. So thank you very much. I really appreciate this opportunity to get to talk to your audience and the folks at IOC. So yeah, my journey. My PhD is in industrial organizational psychology. So I actually started my career as an HR and management consultant at PricewaterhouseCoopers in Washington, D.C., and evolved into working at IBM, not by choice, by purchase, because they bought us out when I was at PwC over a weekend. And I left on a Friday, it was PwC. I came back on a Monday and it said IBM on the door. And so I
Wow.
donned the blue suit, got the Watson chip, and kind of got integrated into the big IBM board for a while. But yeah, then I'd gone back to do my doctorate. And while I was doing my PhD, I was doing some consulting work with McCarty, USA, that was based in Miami. So I did my PhD at FIU, which is in Miami. And when I was working with their leaders in their sales and their marketing division, it became evident that they needed some help. So I was really focused on selection, hiring, onboarding, particularly leaders, and then some leader development and offsite work. And I was doing something similar for a private equity owned employee outsourcing company based like about an hour away north of Miami. And it was probably in a 3-month span that the CEOs from both those companies approached me saying, oh, hey, by the way, based on your background and your education in psychology and your experience, I have this executive that's struggling, right? Or I have these 2 leaders that aren't getting along. It was kind of 2 different cases in those. And so I began the journey like a lot of coaches did, more in that executive remedial help space, which is never easy and not always a great entry point. But from there, I realized, before I can embark on this, I really felt like, even though I had undergraduate psychology, a master's in counseling and psych services, a PhD in industrial org psychology, I didn't feel like I had the tools I needed. I had the underpinnings, the theory, the knowledge, but I didn't have the skills. So I ended up enrolling in Jeff Arbach's College of Executive Coaching program that back then he used to travel it. And so they had it in Florida for a time. And that was really eye-opening. And it was a great opportunity for me to look at how do I take psychology and blend it with a lot of the skills that are needed in coaching that are very different in a lot of ways, and understand how to combine those forces to be effective at supporting and helping the executives with their challenges at those 2 organizations. And it grew from there. And I ended up going into private practice and working on my own for about 13 years or so, and very successfully so. And I enjoyed it. I loved it. And during that time, I did a book. And I know you're an author. That's a journey.
Right.
That got me a lot of attention. And then so I did in the US the Today Show and the show Live with Kelly and a lot of cable network shows, started writing a regular column on workplace challenges and coaching type issues. My first book was The U Plan, which is really kind of a self-coaching guide that came out right after the Great Recession. And so, so that was the beginning of my journey. And I was very happy with how things were going. EY tapped me to be an advisor to their Entrepreneur of the Year program and their Entrepreneurial Winning Women program. Did a lot of cool stuff there. Ended up working with a food manufacturer on retainer for 10 years as their coach and leader development kind of specialist, advising and coaching and doing a lot of different consulting work, all underneath the owners. So and so it was a really great, cool journey. And what I can tell you, so I made the joke like, lightning striking. That was a long, 15, 20-year journey.
Right.
I had no intent of being in academia. I was, in fairness, I did work with FIU, Florida International University, the president of the university, and a good friend of mine, Nathan Hiller, when they launched the Center for Leadership there, which is a world-renowned center. It's won all sorts of awards. So I was a founding faculty there, but that was executive ed type work. And so was on faculty with them for, 10, 12 years. And doing those programs, which are CEO focused, but those were like 5-day offsites along with a coaching component that we did add in. But other than that, not interested in academia. And so what happened was I was at a conference in Baltimore in 2018, and I happened to be standing in line behind this woman, Anna Tavis, who was the academic director at NYU, who had launched, redeveloped a classic kind of HR master's program and launched a human capital analytics and technology program, which is very on point for where that space was evolving to. And she said she had a proposal in for an MS degree in executive coaching. I said, that's great. I think the field really desperately needs it, and it's important for us. Good luck. So she kept on me and said, well, why wouldn't you want to be involved? And I said, I'm not really an academic. I found it interesting. So we stayed in touch, and then she convinced me to throw my hat in the ring when the international search for that but for the first faculty to launch it came open. And so long story short, Jeff, I joined NYU in January of 2020, had a great office location in Midtown Manhattan, and I was there for about a minute before I got kicked out. Remember telling my wife, "This is so cool. I got this great location. We're right on Bryant Park." For anyone
it's right on 42nd Street. I know it well.
right near Times Square, and you know. But so we successfully launched in September of 2020, and we've had a very successful run. We're in our fourth academic year. We've got over 50 alumni. We launched this, which I know we'll talk more about, but we launched our Coaching and Technology Summit. We had our third one at the beginning of June this year. I just launched the Coaching Innovation Lab in February of 2024, which we're doing a lot of exciting, cool stuff there. So we've done a lot in a short period of time. And of course, Anna and I did the book, The Digital Coaching Revolution, which really was born out of our time at the what we learned from our Coaching Tech Summit. It's been an exciting ride, and we're very excited where we are, but we still have a lot of work to do.
That's great. I love what you said about lightning strikes. It's always serendipitous in some ways. I mean, I always think when I look back on my own career that you sort of put yourself in the right place at the right time, but you never know what that's actually going to turn into. You know, as many of my other podcasts and coaching guests have said, it's a lot about the relationships of the people that you meet along the way. And it sounds like Anna was obviously key to your entering into the NYU sphere. It's so great to listen to your background because we have met a couple of times, but I did not realize just how incredibly similar our backgrounds are. Because, you know, I started my career at Booz Allen and Hamilton, and then I also did the same thing, started get my PhD because I didn't feel like I was qualified to really deal with some of the crazy people who were at the top of a company like Booz Allen and Hamilton, and ultimately, similarly, migrated from, you know, doing leadership development where coaching was really only a minor component of it to ultimately a private practice, and then joining as a volunteer at the Institute of Coaching at Harvard. But I also was, as you know, faculty at NYU for quite a few years doing leadership. So it's just so interesting. And then ultimately, when I decided I needed to get a credential, which I'm sure you also made this decision long after the PhD and everything else, I too went to Jeff Auerbach's course in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh my God, I was in Boca.
Obviously, we're not here to promote the College of Executive Coaching. But having both graduated from it, I can honestly say it was really worthwhile. And now here you are, and here we all are, dealing with digital revolution, as you call it. And I think that's a really good word because it is revolutionary what's happening in the space around artificial intelligence and technology. And I'm going to let you take the lead since you're just coming off of a symposium at NYU around this theme. You know, I'd love to get your thoughts on artificial intelligence, but maybe even before we get to that, step back a little bit, because your book goes into depth around the evolution of technology as a key element within the coaching space. So talk a little bit about the history and maybe then bring us up to where you see things today.
Ready to advance your coaching practice? Join the Institute of Coaching and tap into the world's leading resource for coaching science and professional development. With over 4,000 members across 130 countries, the IOC offers invaluable networking opportunities with an elite global coaching community and innovative learning to broaden your knowledge and keep you at the forefront of coaching best practices. Engage in cutting-edge learning events with world-renowned coaching scholars, from webinars and seminars to discussion groups, research projects, and more. Try any membership free for 30 days. Use promo code IOC Podcast and visit instituteofcoaching.org/join to get started.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways, in my opinion, to look at the history of coaching, because there are a lot of different streams that have influenced where coaching is today. You could look at psychology, of course, right? Kind of the paths where you and I come from, where you have a lot of influences from the counseling tradition, from cognitive behavioral therapy influences, right, which is probably the most well-researched therapeutic space. So, and Socratic method, if you want to even go back further than that, and the Stoic philosophers, Epictetus, right, all that has how that's flowed into, that's one stream that's
Right.
really heavily influenced. I think alongside that, you have sort of business programs, business guru types who popularized working in industry, kind of starting as consultants, advisors, and morphing into coaching. Your PDI type consulting firms that have evolved, your Korn Ferries, Heidrick & Struggles, right? And LHH, you had coaches internally that were more for career and transition, but that kind of took on bigger roles or more coaching the executive. You then have, I think, a lot of sort of pop culture kind of life coaching and people who are sort of gurus in different spaces that develop their own kind of methods and techniques. Of course, certainly in the business side of it, you famously have Sir Jonathan Whitmore, right, and Timothy Galway, right, who had kind of converged from the inner game of tennis with Galway to the grow model from Whitmore. So you have a lot of different paths, right? You look at, of course, someone who's very influential to me, a David Peterson, kind of an early a psychologist. Just a quick story, because when I first got the role at NYU, the first call I made was to David Peterson because I knew he would be equal opportunity supportive and punch me in the face. Anyone who knows that's David. And I knew I needed that. And we had a really great conversation about where in the world does a Master of Science degree fit into this world of coaching. And he became the first advisory board member for our launch of the program. And he was great, and he had a great influence in a lot.
He was, yes.
Yeah, sorely missed without a doubt. And I know he was very influential in the IOC community as well. So, but he was a great influence on our program. But the important part is that what we found is a need to professionalize coaching, right? And so the challenge became, you have so many different influences and so many different disciplines that kind of where coaching was coming out of, that there was not total agreement on like, how do you train someone to be a coach? What are the core competencies of being a coach? And I think you saw certainly in 1995, with the birth of International Coaching Federation, and you saw, I think it was 2006 with EMCC. You would have to remind me IOC, when IOC was born, like
2009, I think.
2009. I think all these entities started to help bring together some kind of common language, some kind of common understanding of what are the core competencies, what is the active coaching, how do we define coaching, and then what are the ethical standards and what should we abide by, what do we hold ourselves to, how do we hold ourselves accountable, and so on. So Jeff, we spend some time in the book, the first couple of chapters, of giving our take on where we think how all this sort of started to converge and how it got us to this point now. Because it's really important to know as a coach, and I've read a lot of different takes on the history of coaching, and there are a lot of various different takes depending on how you got into it, the region you're in. I will be honest, we are probably more American-centric, no doubt, in our take. You know the European view very well, and I've gotten to know my friends over in the UK. We knew there was a convergence of different disciplines. And the important part is when it comes to the evolution of technology, guess what? They're trying to figure out what to base their work on. The reason we call it digital coaching revolution, the revolution came during the COVID era when organizations were looking for help, because leaders and managers, and this, Jeff, from your personal work, right, were struggling, whether it was struggling operating remotely, being in isolation, managing families and kids at home, managing teams who had families and kids, other home challenges, or those who had to go in and use PPE, personal protective equipment. It was really, really hard. Training wasn't really very effective to help with this. People needed to talk to somebody. Most of coaching at that time was either consulting firm offerings, either large firm, boutique firm, that were more oriented towards helping leaders and leaders in transition, to their roles or the classic challenges that leaders have, right? It wasn't really well oriented towards larger populations, because of price point and the orientation of how these services were offered. And then, Jeff, at the other end, you had just tons of independent coaches who aren't super well connected to industry. So what happened is the digital providers said, hey, look, we can scale coaching services, offer it on demand, and orient it toward the needs of your people. And we could do it remotely. And we've got coaches all over the world because we can manage and maintain these coaching pools. So they scaled coaching services during really COVID, because that was the accelerant. They didn't really catch until the COVID era. And then they came out and they adjusted their models as they went, and they learned a lot. And then post-COVID, I think, is when we really had the true digital coaching revolution.
And then when they start to have a digital revolution, what does that mean for you?
So for us, it was, how did they start using technology, scale coaching services to manage and monitor coaching services, and also to collect data? Coaching is a very unique, bespoke, one-to-one interaction or intervention, if you will, right? That mostly operates within the container of a confidential box, right? Whether that's in person in a room, over a phone call, or on a Zoom call. But when you offer these services en masse, there's data that can be collected from these interactions. They started looking at different ways to collect data because there was a strong movement in HR for better analytics to make more data-driven decisions as opposed to gut feel decisions. Right. And so that started to find its way into the coaching space. And you could do that now when you were recording and capturing data. Now, of course, there's controversy always around what data should you capture, what can you capture. In the US, we really have no regulation there. In Europe, you absolutely have GDPR, European Act, other rules that are much more, I think, progressive and protective.
And when you think about tools, the evolution from scaling coaching, collecting data, at the end of the day, for the most part, I think you'd agree, coaching has still retained its core modality, which is human to human or human to team. I know for myself, working with a company like BetterUp or ASAP or Ezra or any of the larger coaching service companies, they provide framing, they provide a lot of ways of structuring, contracting, and as you said, collecting data, studying what works, having a more analytical approach to, okay, we provided coaching to, 50 people, and here's the 10 coaches, and we have so much more data around who actually did accomplish their goals, who actually did get promoted. So, they're starting to be able to have an infrastructure, I guess I would call it, a data-driven infrastructure. But there's been a leap just in the last 24 months that we're all trying to figure out what it's going to lead to, which is called ChatGPT, artificial intelligence, the chat bots, the Marshall bot, when we had Marty Seligman, the father of positive psychology, who we just had at our live conference at Harvard 2 months ago, he shared with us, and he's this wonderful, presence in his early 80s, but he shared with us the Marty bot, and on one level, I'll give you one touch of my opinion, and then I want to hear a lot about your expertise and your sense of this. But, these things are potentially incredibly powerful tools in terms of offering lower cost access to really wise people, like their knowledge. Marty Seligman, a Marshall Goldsmith, put into a accessibility tool, like where they're on their phone or whatever, and to be able to ask a very simple question and then to get a rich, like 50 years worth of experience kind of answer that you can then potentially put to work is certainly an incredible, valuable resource. But on the other hand, coaching is not, as we know it, about giving information, which is not what these tools do, right? They do provide information. In many ways, I would call them consulting bots, not coaching bots. So I'd love to I'm going to stop there, but I'd love to have you speak to how this AI revolution is showing up in your world, the positives and the, maybe what we should be worried about or concerned about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm going to come back to the Marty bot, the Marshall bot, because I have experience with both of those. But I do want to touch on one thing from our last exchange, and that is what I think from a coach perspective, the ability to focus your time and attention on coaching as opposed to marketing yourself, prospecting, finding clients. That's been a tremendous help from the digital coaching providers out there. Now, there's been challenges around, the argument about rate suppression and have rates gone down? Have they controlled kind of the market on who gets paid what and how. It's very different across providers. And
Right.
We just had an event in Berlin a couple weeks ago where there were folks, from some smaller companies, like Sharpest being one of them, talking about different ways of structuring rates and models. And you've worked with AceUp, which is very different than BetterUp, which is very different than Bravely, and so on. So, and there's still tremendous benefits to coaches, and there can be downsides for certain coaches, right? It really just depends. But they are leading the market, but they're also helping provide you tools and data that otherwise you haven't traditionally had access to as a coach, but that may be changing. We talk so much about the democratization of coaching, which always made me crazy and we talk about this in the book, democratizing coaching was never a realistic view in the original model of scaling based on people, because you have quality concerns, you have training, credentialing concerns. Do you really have enough coaches out there to truly democratize coaching and make it available to everybody? The answer is absolutely not. But with AI, that's become a bit of a different story now, because there are ways we can democratize, quote, coaching or human development services in a way that we couldn't before. But we have to think about how we talk about it, what we mean by, quote, coaching versus human development versus, like you said, learning, training, advising, expert resources, and so on. So now we're in this evolutionary phase where, from my view, the digital coaching providers and the leading firms out there providing coaching services are evolving from being just pure tech coaching provider services to more robust learning services that are led by, or at least enabled by, coaching. The founders of these firms were always very upfront with me from the first time I met them at the first summit we did at NYU back in 2022. And that was, we're going to evolve from just being coach providers to being learning and development providers, but led by coaching. So I just wanted to get that out there, because that's an important thing we cover in the book. And that's an important part of this revolution. And I believe that now we're at a point where the technology is enabling this in ways that we haven't been able to do before. So first, does that make sense before I get into the Marty bot?
Yeah, and what I'm finding interesting in the way you just reflected that is it sounds like there's been a almost a reversal evolution, because I think that back in the days in the late 90s when I was entering into this space, learning and development was at the lead and coaching was added. And it wasn't really even taken seriously other than in a remedial sense early on. And then over time, it started to be considered a more professional and a separate lane, really, starting with senior executives that found that to be beneficial. And now what you're saying is it's almost a little bit of a role reverse. We've come full circle. And now coaching is ubiquitous. Everybody wants to have a coach. The science has evolved so that we can now demonstrate the value of coaching. We've developed all these wonderful programs, including yours, that actually develop the skills and capacities of coaches to be able to provide the services. And what you're saying is that it's now circled back to being really part of a packaging. And that packaging will be learning and development in a broader sense. And coaching will be one of the key components of that, I would think. That leads us to, does artificial intelligence capability actually make the coach obsolete? Or does it make the coach and the human-to-human component even more important? And that, to me, is probably the core question that we'll end up in.
Yes, and but I appreciate that reflection, Jeff, because you put it better than I could. It is that reversal, right? Of instead of L&D and then you hook coaching to it, it's really coach-led learning and development now is kind of the space we're in. And there'll be some kind of equalizing effect at some point where we get the right blend, right? Where we figure that out. The hard question here is, okay, so we couldn't scale coaching services when it was purely just trying to rely on getting the right number of credentialed, trained coaches across time zones and with good 24/7 availability, right? Just, it's very, very difficult to do that. Now, AI technology is enabling this, but as you brought up, what is the AI actually doing, and how do we use AI in a way that's effective, that enhances the coaching experience as opposed to replacing it? AI is evolving very, very rapidly. There is no doubt that there is an arms race right now out there to develop the fastest, best generative AI, most human-like interactions possible. OpenAI with ChatGPT, they took the gamble and put it out there into the world, right? Into the public, and they got the attention and then subsequently the funding, right, to back what they're doing.
Right.
And also they got uptake. They got to 100 million users faster than any other technology ever, than any release of anything, any social media, TikTok or anything like that. So they help make AI part of the general everyday conversation, because AI is not new. Generative AI is definitely new, but the development of AI has been around for a long time. And there's a great book called The Alignment Problem that's a fascinating read. It's kind of a longer book, but it's Brian Christian who really talks about the evolution of AI. That came out in 2020. So before we heard about ChatGPT or anyone knew what OpenAI was. So when it comes to coaches and developing coaches, and then the integration of AI. So when you see things like, for example, the Marty bot. So I was at Better Up's Uplift conference. So I got to chat with Marty Seligman, who is it's so cool. I mean, he's a living legend. Within just a few minutes of that conversation, I went over and tried the Marty bot. And it was weird because it sounds exactly like him. And I asked some kind of nuanced questions because I certainly teach his work in my program. I was blown away. I mean, I'm standing there going, oh my God, I feel like I'm actually talking to him, just doing it voice on a computer. They told me it took like just 15 minutes of recordings to nail his voice. But he'll tell you, right, as I'm sure at your event, he said probably the same thing, is that it's basically just trained on his body of knowledge, his perspective. So it's essentially a query tool, right? To what would Martin Seligman think about this? Well, just ask his bot and it'll look at his body of work. I think they include media interviews, like all the above that he's done, and it'll tell you, right? It's not a coach. It's a place to just get information. The same thing with the Marshall bot. So he wouldn't tell you that it's a coach. He'll tell you that it's a great way to query his body of knowledge, particularly he's written 25 plus books, right? So, I mean, it takes all that and gives you some answers. So They aren't coaches, but they're excellent resources. And that's a trend we're going to continue to see. But don't ever mistake that for a coach, because training a coach is less about the person, I would hope, and more, or at least the way we teach, about models, approaches, and ways of questioning, A, and then B, it's about how do you connect with and build that alignment with the individual to get them to be open and honest and want to share. The way we train coaches, right? It's to be that thought partner, guide, and resource. Because as a coach, you do have to be a resource at times. Getting them to reflect and think differently and perspective take. The guide part is how do you help them develop goals and create plans and experiments to go back and try at work. Because otherwise, everything lives and dies within the coaching conversation. They have to be able to go do something. And we do have a bias to action. I definitely do, because the organizations that used to hire me when I spent the majority of my time as a coach, and I still work as a coach now, they expect things to change. They expect something to happen, not just the person feels better talking to me. And then, of course, you do at times as a coach have to be a resource, because you do have a body of professional knowledge within you that may be helpful. Now, here's where these bots and technologies can come into play. Can I point them towards, between sessions, a coach bot or a resource that may have information that may be helpful for them? Like, for example, I'm trying to figure out how to best draw out having a really crucial conversation. Well, can it have access to a bot that knows the crucial conversation model and that book, and help you draw out a plan, right? Where the coach doesn't have to be there with you. And because, look, this is what I do for a living. I train coaches, right? I think that at the middle to higher end, you're going to need human coaches, but they will only be optimized if they are working with AI and other technologies to capture data, to be a resource, and to help nudging between sessions, to help them capture goals, capture what happens in the session, and track progress. And I've seen tools and work with tools that will capture very effectively what you agreed to, what next steps are, but you can edit that. So it takes away some of those tactical kind of administrative tasks, automates it so that you could focus on the learning and the doing. That's where I believe AI as a co-pilot, I think can be really, really powerful. Now that said, because Jeffrey, you went there with the existential threat. So one thing I learned is I put out a demo I did at the Society for Consulting Psychology conference back in February, where I actually sat on a stool and I had my phone on a phone stand on a stool next to me with its own microphone, and I activated a coach I got out of the All GPT's store. It was called Coach. It was super basic, but I wanted to demonstrate to everybody, guess what? Anyone can go out and build a coach and put it on your on the GPT store, or build an app you could put on your phone, and we have no idea what it's trained on, what it's capable of, how dangerous it can be, and so on. So I did a live demo without it being set up, just straight up talking to it to demonstrate, hey, here's what it does, can do, and can't do.
Right.
One of my students took a video, I posted it, and oh my God, the range of reactions were, wow, fascinating. There's some latency. Here's some things you can correct, to people outright attacking me personally for an abomination of calling a technology a coach and using it when that's how it was prompted. I had to call it coach to activate it. So there's a lot of fear and concern out there, right? And so you got to replace fear with curiosity and healthy skepticism. So I always approach technologies with healthy skepticism. For very basic goal attainment, almost like your Weight Watchers style coaching, following grow, yes, I think there is a possibility that some of these generative AI coaches with the right narrow training and kind of generative with some command control around it can probably take you through a goal setting, goal planning, goal execution process.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I had an opportunity, and I'm not advocating for this particular company because there's a lot of them, but I had an opportunity to have a experience with a company called Sherlock AI and talk to their leaders and actually get exposed to the way their coach bot worked. And I have to say, it was quite impressive. I mean, the interaction was very coach-like, and the baseline knowledge that AI bot Sherlock brought to the questions was robust and was rich. I do think, and Nikki Terblanche in South Africa, who's one of the key researchers in this space, I resonate with him saying, as you just said, that the first level will be very specific goal-oriented activities, because having a coach on your phone that is highly sophisticated and can interact with you in a very humane way, in a very human way, with lots of really powerful questions. If you have specific goals, like you really want to change your time management, they can be incredibly powerful. And I do think that that's really important for us as coaches to be aware of, because it's not going to take long. These things are happening faster and faster. That so-called intersection of democratization and these tools will enable, at a much lower price point, for many, many people to have this experience of being coached, not by a person, but by their phone. And I think that's inevitable. It's heading our way. It's going to be on track within months. It's not years and years away. Before I let you go, the key thing to have you as an expert in this space and is really working to develop coaches and to get your arms around this revolution, as you've written about, what would be your tips to the ones that are feeling insecure, those coaches that are fearful, concerned, not quite so excited about being replaced by Sherlock AI or anyone else at this point? What's your survival and thrival tactic that you would share?
So full disclosure, I'm actually advising Sherlock.
You are? Wow. Okay. I know those folks.
So fascinating tool, right? Also, another company I'm actually an angel investor and an advisor of is Ovida, which is not a coach bot, but it's actually a coach training tool where it uses video recordings to help train. And so my students use it. It's amazing because it gives you a dashboard of all the more objective measures of what's happening in your coaching conversations, right? So that's where I like to say we're using AI for good to help you be better. When it comes to advice, look, Jeff, I think it's first and foremost, go out and experiment with some of the different technologies out there. Some of them are free to use. Some of them are pretty inexpensive. A lot of them use like a a monthly subscription model, and they're reasonably inexpensive. Another cool one is Udly, which is great for communications practice. They were at our Coaching Technology Summit back in early June. Another one's Rethinkly, which is another way of learning and building empathy through the use of avatars in sort of created environments. Go take a look at the different technologies that are out there. If you're working on a platform, see what they have also, and ask for data. Ask for access to try some of these out, and then figure out what works for you. But Jeff, what I can tell you is not using these technologies or not integrating them will hurt you in the long run.
Right.
Maybe in the next year or so, you can get by with kind of coaching as usual, but your customers, clients, coachees are going to be expecting more, particularly your younger ones. Your older ones, maybe not as much, but younger ones are going to expect, do I have data from this? What AI can I use? What nudging technology are you going to deploy to help me? And can I connect to bio data with like my Aura Ring or other technologies that I have, like, because we're already tracking steps, we're already using biometrics from our devices that we wear and wearables. Just keep in mind, that's where the space is going. And I think the other thing to remember is there is a big movement towards using technology to enhance well-being. And I think well-being is going to be part of all of our coaching engagements, but definitely don't be afraid to try out some of these new technologies.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, I personally believe that the key is to retain your curiosity. And I remind people when I have these conversations about the curiosity that led them to be a coach in the first place, that same level of curiosity should be entering into the next generation of playing with technology. And I mean the word playing in a true, real sense. Like, we have to play with it. We have to make friends with it, and we have to learn how to leverage what works for us. And that's a personal journey, just like anything else that we learn. So I love that. It's a really, really well said. And to retain your optimism, there was doomsday talk in the late 90s that the internet was going to take us all online. And it's true, it happened. But did we stop wanting to be together and as humans? No. I think, in fact, what most coaches are afraid of is that they won't look smart when they're using these technologies. That's the fear, right? And that's a very human fear, because am I good at this is the fear that I took on or had early on when I wanted to become a psychologist. And the same level of curiosity and learning and doing a program like the one you have at NYU, become a student. Never stop being a student.
No, Jeff, that's a really fair point about fear of looking foolish or looking like you don't understand how to use something. Yeah, I mean, that's always that barrier to any kind of next level of development personally, right? Whether it's going back to be a student or integrating a new technology where it won't work maybe the first couple times, or you'll misunderstand it, or screw it up. Hopefully give yourself the grace to know you're going to stumble your way through it. And when you trial it with clients, or at least friends who will be patient with you as you do it. I'm lucky that I have students that are always patient with me when we try these things. We're working with Rethinkly, as we try that and figure out how to make it work right. You always have some stumbles here and there, but that's the process of learning. And one thought I want to leave you with, and every time I get a chance to speak on where the technology is going and what we're doing, I remind people of one thing. Back in 2018, I was at an event. It was in Monte Carlo, Monaco. It was an EY event. And one of their speakers was Vivian Ming, who's a Carnegie Mellon theoretical neuroscientist who specialized in machine-brain interface. So this is in 2018, right? So we're not talking about ChatGPT or Elon Musk's Neuralink or any of that stuff at this point, right? And after I sat down with her, I did an interview, a media piece. I sat with her and I just asked her, I'm like, so I have a 2-year-old. What do I need to be thinking about for him, like in his future? Like, what should I worry about? Like, what is how should he be educated and all this? And she looked at me, she's like, Woody, you should know this based on your background. She's like, social skill. She's like, don't worry about coding or how to build working with the latest technology. She's like, what he's going to need, no matter how things evolve, because she said programming is going to be automated. A lot of other white collar tasks are going to be automated, which we're seeing happen now. She said, but he's always going to need to be able to negotiate, persuade, collaborate with, and communicate with other humans.
Right.
And so if you can make sure you focus on that, he'll be in great shape, because the other stuff's going to evolve fast, and I can't tell you exactly what he'll need to learn and know there.
Right.
But the human stuff, make sure he's really good at the human stuff. And it makes sense. And,
Right.
it's amazing. I was reflecting on that, a year ago. I was like, wow, she was right. But as coaches, that's where I think we still have a great place to play in, and that is to help our clients and coachees with developing the social skill they need to be as effective as they can in a highly tech-enabled world.
Stay human.
Stay human.
Be even more human, right? Well, listen, this has been a super conversation. I am really honored that you took the time. I think your book is great. The Digital Coaching Revolution, How to Support Employee Development with Coaching Tech, which is incredibly well timed. So I just want to thank you for joining the Institute of Coaching, and we will definitely have you more often and see you again in some of our programs. Thanks again, Woody. We'll hopefully see you very soon again.
Awesome. Bye.
Been a pleasure. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Coaching Revealed, brought to you by the Institute of Coaching. You can learn more about the Institute on our website at instituteofcoaching.org. You can stay up to date with new episodes of our podcast by liking and following Coaching Revealed. You can also find us on social media on LinkedIn, Instagram, and X with the handle Institute of Coaching. We also love hearing from our guests, so please reach out to us with thoughts you have on this episode and any questions you have about coaching. Until next time, this is Emily Tarani with Coaching Revealed.